Thank you very much for that, Kevin. Yeah, and thanks a lot to Marine Money once again for arranging what seems to be, again, a wonderful conference. It's great to be back in Singapore. Great to see so many of you here. They say we live in unprecedented times. We now see, well, we used to see the ship owners queuing up outside the bank's offices asking for money. The table has turned today. We're now seeing the banks standing outside the ship owners' offices asking to lend money. So there's been a bit of a turn of events. There's still, of course, as a capital-intensive industry, there's still a huge need for finance. And what we have seen in the recent years is that the sources of finance has changed. We've seen the banks reducing their amount of lending, and we've seen what's often referred to as alternative capital increasing their presence. And we're here to discuss a little bit of the move into Asia of these alternative sources of capital and also from the banks, and the importance for Western owners of Asian capital. We've got a very esteemed panel here today, so we're very lucky. I'm very excited to hear what they've got to say. They've got a broad range of experience from different parts of the industry, and all represent different type of financial institutions. So very pleased to have them here. I think what I will start off doing is to ask the participants, maybe we could start with you, Marco, at the far end, just to give a very brief introduction, 15 seconds, with your name, the organization, and what you do.
Thanks, Nils. Good afternoon. Yeah, my name is Marco Albers, head of specialized lending at Deka, based in Frankfurt, Germany. So Deka is actually owned by around 380 German savings banks, and we as Deka, we act as the central asset manager of the German savings banks group. So as such, we are one of the largest asset managers in Germany with around 400 billion euros assets under management. Next to this asset management, we have a bank balance sheet, where we are very focused on what we are doing on the lending side. So we have on one hand, we have the international commercial real estate lending and the specialized lending, what I'm heading. And yeah, ship finance is actually part of specialized lending next to like aviation, rail, infrastructure project finance.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, dear ladies and gentlemen. My name is Umid Sharipov. I'm a managing director of ABL Corporation in Japan. We're an asset manager which provides investment opportunities for investors in the transportation field. So far we have been very active on the aviation side, and especially in Japan we have a track record of close to 7 years now, and during which time we have successfully arranged close to 60 transactions for investors in Japan, and obviously we continue to expand our business in Japan and to present investors in the transportation field. Thank you.
Hello everyone, I'm Nicholas Petrakakos. I'm with Alantra. Alantra is an investment bank out of Madrid and London. My team's focus is primarily in shipping and offshore. We're the Maritime and offshore group within the company. We are based in Dubai and Athens, and we focus on raising capital for shipping investments, anything from loans, leases, and equity in the sector, as well as advising clients on mergers and acquisitions, both in the conventional shipping sector as well as in offshore.
Harris.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Harris Antoniou. I'm the founder and managing director of Neptune Maritime Leasing. That does exactly what the title says, Maritime Leasing. In fact, it's great to be back in Singapore, both physically, but also with an office, and I'm very pleased to be collaborating again with CK Kwek, who's been a colleague and a friend for many, many years in many different iterations in banking and finance. Neptune Maritime Leasing was established about 3 years ago with the purpose of actually filling the gap between bank debt and demand for credit. We've expanded quite rapidly. Geographically, we cover Europe, the Americas, and as of recently, Middle East and Asia. And we cover all shipping sectors, mainstream shipping sectors, including, of course, dry bulk tankers, containers. And as of recent, about a year and a half ago, we moved into the offshore sector because we saw quite an interesting opportunity as the sector, both in oil and gas, as well as the wind offshore business, was growing rapidly. So we're pleased to be back and looking forward to do business with you in Asia.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Jerry Zhou from CMB Leasing. It is the first time for me to join this panel. It's my great honor to be here. Now, CMB Leasing is 100% owned by China Merchants Bank. As one of the first 5 financial leasing companies in China, we've been quite active these years. Our total portfolio of the company has exceeded $40 million, 40 billion US dollars, sorry. And our shipping portfolio has exceeded 10 billion US dollars. We are very happy to explore opportunities with various clients from across the globe. Thank you.
Great. Well, thank you very much, gentlemen, for that, and thanks for keeping it so short. I know that can be difficult sometimes when trying to sell yourself. We have a few questions for you, and I think I wanted to start with you, Umid, if that's all right. ABL is traditionally known for its aviation business. So what I wanted to ask you is what kind of made you go into shipping at this point in time, and I think if you can also tell us a little bit of the differences or similarities between ship leasing and aviation leasing?
Sure, thank you. So yeah, as you mentioned, ABL has been very active in the aviation field, and at the same time, our main focus has always been the investors. So it's based on the appetite and the investment profile of the investors. That's the base on which we built our business, and especially because I'm based in Japan, and when we look at the Japanese investors market, I think there are many parties who are involved with investors in Japan. They know very well that both for aviation and shipping, it is the same investor base. So for us, having very long track record and very successful track record going through COVID, which was very successful for shipping, but very difficult for aviation, during which period our investors were still making money on their investments and being very successful, we have been considering to start looking at the shipping as a natural extension, natural path for growth of our business in Japan. And so that's one reason, the fact that we're talking about the same investors. And from the investors' perspective, it's obviously when they're making an investment outside of Japan into the asset, they tend to look at the aviation and shipping because there are several similarities. One is being the fact that we're using the leasing structure, so be it finance lease or operating lease. So the structure-wise, it's very similar. So it's very easy to understand for them, and it's very to market those kind of transactions. And quite often, we're also talking about the similar stakeholders, let's say like banks. You tend to see same banks both on the aviation and shipping side, which makes it relatively easy and smooth, not easy, but smooth to do business. At the same time, I obviously see lots of differences, and because of the differences, I think it makes sense to create that kind of investment portfolio, both on aviation and shipping side, because it would offset. And by differences, I mean one is obviously the volatility, and aviation tends to be more stable. When you check the research, they tend to say that it kind of goes along the global GDP growth, so it's relatively stable. At the same time, on the shipping side, you have ups and downs, and so it's aviation cyclical, shipping is much more cyclical, and so I think that's the one big difference. The other big difference I've been seeing is how segmented it is. On the aviation side, it's quite concentrated. You have two major manufacturers. You have, let's say, two big types of the assets. So, and the carriers, the airlines are rather similar. You may divide it into full service and the LCCs, but otherwise it's There are not that many segments. At the same time, on the shipping side, you have so many different segments. You have different asset sizes, different asset types. So when you draw a matrix for aviation, it would be rather small, but for, I think, shipping, it would be as big as this panel.
Yep. Fair enough. So what you're saying is really that shipping is a lot more exciting than aviation. So
exactly. Yeah, that's a very good summary.
Good. So Nicholas, turning to you. So Alantra has been taking a position alongside owners as an investor, done joint ventures, and you more recently, I think you started focusing more on senior secured loans as well. So I wanted to understand a bit about your strategy going forward in terms of bringing capital to the shipping industry, and what kind of focus will you have in terms of investments? Are you doing investments directly into ships as an owner, or are you going to be focusing more as a pure capital provider in sort of debt time structures?
Of course, thank you. I think for us as advisors into the industry, the strategy is more or less constant, is to bring capital into the industry from new sources and to also make sure that you prepare clients to be quote-unquote bankable. That splits our work effectively into two aspects. One, of course, is working with the clients on projects they have. Here, the challenge is usually you have to deal with an entrepreneur talking with a bank with a completely different mindset, so you need to bridge that gap. And that strategy doesn't change throughout the cycle. It's easier when the market is good, probably, but still there is always a difference in view of the world between a lender and or even a financial investor and a ship owner. On the other hand, our work focuses a lot on educating, if you will, investors to new sectors, for instance, or investors that are not in shipping at all to come into the business, or even banks that focusing on a certain geography to go out of that geography. In that regard, what we have done, let's say in the last 2-3 years, we've done a lot of offshore deals in the Middle East, which is also our focus. Most of the deals that have happened with outside capital into the Middle East, we have advised, and we're quite proud about that. We have also managed at the same time to have Middle Eastern banks invest into European owners, with the example of Eurosys that we announced recently. And so going forward, there is a lot of discussions with current investors and current stakeholders within the broader shipping industry for new types of products, new types of investments into the sector. I think going forward for us, the focus will remain on the financing products, but there is always a look at equity structures such as M&A, which we have done quite a bit, both in Middle East and outside. We recently announced a deal here in actually Singapore with Atlantic Navigation Holdings being sold to Middle Eastern interests. This is pending, of course, approval from the shareholder assembly. So it's an all-around sort of situation. The strategy is there. It's bringing people together at the end of the day, and managing expectations on both sides. But the mix at the end of the day of the product depends a bit on the market. And I think today equity is more interesting than it used to be 2-3 years ago, although it shouldn't. But debt is always there. It's a very capital-intensive industry. You have leasing houses coming in. You have the Chinese leasing houses coming in, Japanese leasing houses coming in that are now available to owners that they weren't 2 or 3 years ago because of size or the cycle in the capital market, the cycle in the shipping markets, etc.
Great, thank you. Jerry, if I can turn to you, I mean, CMB is, of course, one of the well-known leasing houses in China. And we've seen, I would say, over the last 4 or 5 years in particular, the leasing companies compete much more directly against the banks. So I wanted you to comment a little bit on that. Whether you think this is something that's going to continue, or how far the Chinese leasing companies actually are willing to go to stay competitive against the banks. But maybe before you answer that, maybe you could give us a quick update on the status of the leasing industry in China?
Thanks, Nils. No, Chinese leasing has been expanding quite fast, not only in shipping, but also in terms of total portfolio. No, in China there are mainly two types of leasing houses. 71 financial leasing companies regulated by China's State Financial Regulatory Administration, and a lot more are regulated by China's Ministry of Commerce. And the first type is generally sponsored by a commercial bank and are more strictly regulated. And there are also some very successful players of the second type. Chinese leasing, the total portfolio of the first 71 financial leasing companies has reached 560 billion US dollars. So that's very, very huge. It also leads to a 9.3% increase year on year. As for non-performing loan ratios, for most financial leasing companies, it is quite low, below 2%. And for CMBFL, our non-performing loan ratio was merely 0.19% at the end of this first quarter. So altogether, Chinese leasing houses holds roughly 1,800 aircraft and 2,000 vessels. And more are coming into this market. So I think Chinese leasing as a whole would like to contribute more to the shipping sector. Yeah.
And do you see I mean, what we have seen at least is that the margins have dropped quite a lot in China. Do you see that continuing? Is there a lot more fat to give in there, or are we starting to reach the bottom of the pricing levels?
Yeah, I think, frankly speaking, if you look at the margins of commercial banks in China, it is also narrowing. Yep. Yeah, maybe around 150 bips. I mean, in the interest spread, because we are also facing lots of competitions inside China. And for margins in shipping, I think we are willing to compete and cooperate with international banks, because almost every Chinese leasing company's annual drawdown amount and business portfolio targets are on the rise every year. So we have to work hard, and we have to seize every opportunity. So sometimes we are quite flexible. We could offer quite competitive margins to the market.
Great, thank you. And on top of that, of course, there's been an expansion in the number of leasing companies as well. So I guess there's a lot more internal competition. So but thank you very much for that, Jerry. Over to you, Harris. Neptune, you've been around for 3 years now. Defining yourself as a leasing company. So are you competing with Jerry, or are you focusing on different markets, different type of companies? Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, sure. We decided to go into leasing because definitely in Europe, with the regulations that have been implemented in the banking regulations, there's been a decrease overall of available capital for shipping. Basel IV is coming up. Basel IV is going to impose stricter limits on risk-weighted assets and the weight they impose on the bank's balance sheet. And as a result, two things will happen. One is that banks will need to keep more capital for the same amount of lending. And number two, most likely there will be some effects, increasing effects on pricing. In fact, the full effect of the Basel IV regulation is going to be felt by the 1st of January 2025 in most European countries. And it will also impact American banks as well, perhaps to a lesser extent here in Asia. So we saw this and we decided to actually set up this leasing company because we felt that it was the best medium that we could use to create a new source of funding for the industry, following the example of course, Chinese leasing companies that were the first comers into the field. I think the potential for growth is very large. Shipping and ship leasing will most likely follow the trajectory of aviation leasing that we've seen expanding from 1 or 2% of the aviation fleet in the 70s to perhaps 55 or more % of the aviation fleet today. And if you compare that to where ship leasing is, we probably have another 30 or 40% growth in the next few years. So there's plenty of room for everyone to be active. We are competing, but also cooperating with Chinese leasing companies. We have a stronger presence in Europe. We often focus on small and medium enterprises, where these may be perhaps outside the core focus of large leasing companies. And as such, we see ourselves, in fact, as a bridging ground between them and what's happening in Europe.
So you complete rather than compete, is what you're saying?
Compete.
You compete. Good. Marco, over to you. So as the only traditional bank on the panel. So we've seen, obviously, you becoming quite active in this part of the world, DekaBank. We see more and more of you here. So what is it that you provide to the Asian owners that the banks that are here already doesn't provide? How do you stay competitive in this market?
Well, I think it's a broad mix of different products, let's put it this way, or ways of lending to the shipping industry. As you said, in the first place, we are a traditional ship lender, so we have our bilateral relationships. We support ship owners across the globe. We have also done quite a bit of new business here in Asia, Singapore owners, for example. So that's one way of doing ship lending. But then we are also partnering up with other capital providers or arrangers, advisors. Actually, when I look here at the panel, we've done Chinese ship lease. We did business with CMB, but also other Chinese lessors. We did business with ABL on the aviation side so far only, but maybe more to come on the shipping side. With Nico, we are discussing a project right now. I went to Greece to visit Neptune 1.5 years ago, first time. So there are a lot of ways of cooperation and joint efforts to touch the market and to find business. Having said that, Asia obviously is a quite competitive market these days, and you have to ask yourself actually whether you want to compete with the low margin levels you see right now here in the markets. I mean, at a certain point of time, it's a strong market right now, and then we are all happy about it. But that will change sometime sooner or later. So the ratings will also then deteriorate and risk costs go up. So how can you justify margin levels then as low as they are right now? I mean, you will not make any money on the business anymore. So yeah, you have to find the right deals these days.
Thank you very much. And I guess a question for all of you. Are there certain areas in Asia that you wouldn't touch as a business? Maybe not so much for you, Jerry, but for the other panel members?
Well, I wouldn't say that. I would want to focus on what we would touch rather than what we would not touch. Well, in fact, as I mentioned, we cover all sectors, yep, with the exception of cruise and ferries. And as of recent, about 1.5 years ago, we also, as I mentioned also earlier, decided to go into the offshore sector. We've done this successfully in Europe and the Middle East, and hopefully we'll be able to do that in Asia as well. I think it's a sector that provides opportunities, and it is a sector that perhaps is less attended by the banking world, and as a result offers good sort of a breeding ground for us.
Well, sectors is very simple for us. I mean, we only look into the main three sectors: shipping, dry, wet, container. Maybe a little bit of niche, say car carriers, multi-purpose. But that's pretty much all. And from a regional perspective, there are actually also very few countries. I mean, it's Singapore, of course, Korea, Thailand. That's probably all I could think of in Asia right now. Japan would be too competitive for us, and well, maybe Indonesia, but yeah, it boils down to very few countries actually in Asia.
Niklas, Umid, do you want to?
Yeah, for us, Asia is, for the past 5 years, has been a very good source of capital for our clients, both in Middle East and Europe. We expect that to remain true for the years to come, especially given the situation with a lot of prepayments, a sort of relaxation in if you will, criteria of lending, especially from Chinese leasing. In terms of sectors, shipping is as global as it gets in its operation, so I don't believe there is a sector we wouldn't touch per se. We see more activity on the offshore sector, and we focus on that, so we do expect more business from this side of the world, as it's less focus on green technologies and green mandates and the like. So we do expect to increase the business on that side of our mandate.
Right.
I just wanted to add also that what we see now, of course, is a perfect scenario. Markets are doing well, owners are cash rich, banks are willing to lend, and to a certain extent, my experience in banking tells me that banks are typically pro-cyclical, and they tend to lend more money as margins go down and demand increases. So, and I think the trick here would be to stay the course also in a counter-cyclical way. So what are we going to do when the tide turns and when the conditions are getting more difficult? And I think our experience and our flexibility and of course the shareholders that we have that come from a very strong shipping background make us believe that we are there for the long run through good and bad. And I think that's a key differentiating factor.
Point. Jerry, turning back to you, I think one of the questions that we get asked a lot is about the property sector in China. It's something that we all read about in the press in Europe and the US. Do you think the difficulties or the challenges in that sector will have any impact on your ability to continue as a leasing company or providing a certain amount of capital? Or, I mean, it could be positive or negative, but do you think it'll have an impact?
I think, Chinese leasing, the direct impact is minimal because, in China, property is considered to be an unqualified leasing object according to certain regulations by the government. So Chinese leasing on the whole has a very extremely low exposure to this sector. Having said that, the indirect impact could be immense. Because property sector is one of the most important pillar industries in China. It is related to so many other sectors. And Chinese leasing has made a lot of lendings to those we call government-backed entities, like water plants. The water price in China is relatively low compared to like, let's say, in Europe, because the government thinks it is a commodity used by everyone. So they are priced low. The previously mentioned the government-backed entities needs supports from local governments to pay off the debt. Previously, when the property market is quite good, the local governments can sell lots of land into the market, into the real estate developers. But nowadays, it is different. So it means less revenue from land sales, fewer physical income. So Chinese leasing companies are becoming more cautious on this sector. So I think that might be one of the reasons many Chinese leasing houses start to look at shipping and want to do more shipping businesses.
So more money to come. Good. I think we touched on, well, certainly Harris, Nicholas, and I think to a certain extent Marco, we had talked about whether we should speak a bit about offshore, but I think you sort of touched upon it, or is there anything else you want to say? It's obviously offshore is a big, or used to be a big industry here in Singapore. So would you, I mean, Harris, I think you said it directly, you will support offshore, so.
Well, it's funny that, about a couple of years ago, looking at the various industries and trying to decide which way to go, where to focus, I saw the same conditions developing in the offshore industry to those that I experienced in the mid-90s when I was building the offshore portfolio of a smaller Dutch bank at the time, and which were what? Basically, the industry has gone through a major recession like it did now. A lot of companies had declared bankruptcy or went through Chapter 11, and as they were emerging out of it and oil prices started rising, there was a clear gap in the market, not enough ships, etc. So typically that's a wave that lasts for a few years. This time around, in addition to the normal cycle that we're experiencing, so not enough vessels, significant demand to replenish oil reserves and gas reserves. In addition to that now, we have the demand that is generated by the wind sector, offshore wind. Offshore wind is growing very rapidly. China, of course, is a major market for offshore wind, but it's very local, so it's serviced by the Chinese banks. But in Europe, offshore wind is an industry that's growing by 14–15% per year for the foreseeable future. So that comes in addition to the offshore oil and gas business. So you have demand from two sectors, and a number of these units can actually be employed on both. So you have a double whammy in a sense that supports this industry, and that's why we decided to actually enter both, and we've done it. And I think the prospects look good for the foreseeable future.
Okay, thank you. Do you want to say
the only thing that I would like to add here is that offshore is an industry that now is doing fantastic. But it's still an industry that's not very likable to banks. So it's maybe the only subsector of shipping that banks, leasing houses and the likes do not want to touch. Unless it's the wind stuff, the green stuff that Harry mentioned. Yeah. So it's an area that a lot of the alternative financiers have come in. And I think by now all of them have invested in offshore, which shows that what we used to call in the mid-2000s, 2010s, the smart money is investing in that sector. The banks and everyone else is still keeping outside, which is great for us as advisors because that's what we do. But we do expect that this will change in the next 2–3 years once companies get larger, because we see a lot of consolidation in that industry also. So that will start bringing, we hope, banks and more long-term capital into that industry as well.
Excellent, thank you. Marco, you're probably the sort of best authority on this in terms of Basel IV. You couldn't go to a conference before COVID where there wasn't talks about Basel IV, and then it went completely quiet. Obviously the regulations are starting to kick in, and it's getting tighter and tighter for the banks. How do you see that as how is that affecting the competitiveness of your product?
Well, actually, by Basel IV, I don't know how many times I've been asked since I've been in Singapore, arriving the day before. Basel IV obviously drives everyone. What's the impact and the effect going forward? For us as Deka, actually, we don't see a real negative impact on our liquidity costs. But that's mainly due to the reason that we are not a traditional bank, not a commercial bank like the others. So we benefit from our asset management unit, which is the larger part of our group. so that we don't have any issues with risk-weighted assets or allocation into this respect. Actually, we made some internal calculations that we come even off a little bit better in this respect, that we can lower our margins. So, but that's very special, actually, and good for us, let's put it this way.
Yep. Thank you very much for that. I think we're starting slowly to run out of time. But I wanted to have a little bit of a round with some quick answers from you guys in terms of one-word answers, more market-related and sectors. So if you each were to pick one sector to focus on for your firm, what would it be? Jerry, start on this side.
I think it would be LNG.
LNG?
Yeah.
Okay, that's fine. We don't need more than that. That's all you're allowed to say. Harris?
We didn't practice for this.
You have to get some surprises, right?
No, I actually mentioned that right now I think our pick would be offshore.
Yep.
Yeah, same for me. Offshore is the place to be.
Yeah.
Probably containers.
Containers for you, yeah. And Marco?
Multi-purpose heavy lift.
Multi-purpose heavy lift. Interesting. And turning it a little bit, so if I was to give you, I'll make it very clear that I'm not going to do this, but if I gave you $1 million personally, would you still invest in the same sector for your own account?
Yeah, we make no differentiation between our own account and our investors' account.
I think that's the answer your shareholder wants to hear. Very good.
I would say yes, and maybe also public equities of some of the companies that are listed.
If I were corporate, yes, because our investors are corporates. I'm an individual.
Fair enough. Marco?
Yeah, same way.
Yes, for me, LNG.
Good. Very consistent. Which of the sectors is going to be the first one to see a downturn? Marco, start on your side now.
Tankers.
I would go with Marco, yeah.
Tankers?
Well, it's anyone's guess. I wouldn't take one, to be honest. Everything can come down as fast as it did go up, right? So.
Okay. Harris?
I think it all depends on the Red Sea situation. If that resolves itself one way or the other, then we're going to have a relatively significant impact on a number of sectors.
Shipping is highly unpredictable. My guess is container shipping.
Okay, great. Thank you very much for that. I think that concludes. Do we have time for any questions or no? We're asked to move on. So thank you very much for that, gentlemen. That was very,
Thank you.
Very useful.